It's a pleasure to be here, and I will mention some things I was going to mention before I get started. So, first of all, this is a beautiful area. I recently moved to Pittsburgh about 3 years ago. I was recruited to Pitt, and I wasn't ready for how beautiful this region is. And even just being here like last night, I guess, it was just again, just I totally understand why people live here. It's a beautiful place. The only negative thing I can say about this place is that the craps table at this casino rolls way too many sevens. So that's the one thing that I will suggest that we watch out for. Great, we got it up. So again, it's a pleasure to be here. And I also want to apologize for the fact that the title on the agenda is different than the title on these slides. That's my fault, not Autumn's fault. So my apologies, but I'm going to be talking about the same topic, which really is focused on workforce, all of us. What's happening with regards to kind of our futures as AI progresses, what's happening with our children. That's another thing that I'm very, very concerned about, and I am starting to write a lot about, both in the public as well as speaking about it privately with business leaders. So, with that said, great, it's working. The big idea for today is that, and I always try to have one idea with any of my presentations, so you can walk away with this thought, is that the impacts that AI, I'm going to take this so I can see, the impacts that AI for software engineering is having right now should be telling us something about how we prepare for the future. I know that there's actually some software engineers in this room, so I think this is directly applicable to you. But what I'm realizing with regards to AI's effect on software engineering, and it's very, very, in a sense, maybe ironic, or I don't know what the other word that we could use for this is that I don't think as people have been developing AI technologies, they realized you're kind of working yourself out of a job, which is really, really some twist of irony, because it's happening right now. So I have 3 points this morning, I guess, still. The history of why AI is so good at coding. Secondly, the changing landscape of software engineering. And third, preparing for career fluidity. So first, the history of why AI is so good at coding. All right, so, okay, I have, I think, 45 minutes or so to talk, so I'm not going to be able to get extremely detailed on really anything. So anything that I'm sharing this morning, this is very, very high-level overview of how this stuff works. If you want to, I can nerd out at any level of depth that you would like to later. But with that said, I would like to suggest that AI is that the term AI is divided into two types of AI. Now, there's actually hundreds. First, I'll give the story of IBM, who actually Dave just introduced me, I think, from IBM. In 1997, I don't know if you remember this, I was just starting college. Many of you maybe were just being born. Some of you maybe were older. In 1997, IBM unveiled this computer called Deep Blue. Some of you remember this? And it was able to play chess. And this was a huge accomplishment in computer science and computer engineering. Why? Because this computer went against one of the world's grandmasters. I believe his name was Garry Kasparov. This was highly televised, and it beat Garry Kasparov in chess. And so then all these news reports, because I was really into computers even as a teen, they were all talking to these people at IBM, and how did you do this? And then IBM was explaining essentially, well, we got some really smart chess people, and then we got some really smart programmers, and we put them together, and then we just line by line coded up how chess works, and then what are the best strategies to use in chess. So essentially, they used computer programming to create rules with regards to the game of chess and rules with regards to how to use strategies for the game of chess. Now, this type of AI, because it really is artificial intelligence, it's called symbolic AI. I won't go into why that technical term is used as symbolic AI, but I like to call it rules AI because I think it's more memorable. Okay, this is the Joe Yoon definition. Rules AI. You understand it because it has a set of rules, and those rules are completely human understandable, even if it's a lot. Right? It'll take you a long time to read the code, but you could understand it if you wanted to take the time to do so. Well, in 2016, Google came out with a new supercomputer, an AI computer called AlphaGo. And this game, instead of playing chess, it played this game Go. If any of you have time, go to YouTube and watch the AlphaGo documentary. It is insane. And basically, what they had to deal with was apparently this game Go. I don't know how. I've never played Go. It's this Eastern Asian game. Apparently, there is an infinite number of moves possible in this game. How is that possible in a finite board, right? But an infinite number of moves. So Google realized, okay, if we're going to create a game or an artificial intelligence computer that can beat everybody at Go, we can't use rules AI. That'd be impossible if there's an infinite number of moves. So we've got to create a different structure. And this is kind of back in the days of Geoffrey Hinton working at Google and all these AI godfathers, recent Nobel Prize winner. And so they said, okay, then let's do it differently. Let's actually give this computer a framework, which we will call artificial neural networks. And then we will just give the computer really two things, which basically is the precepts of reinforcement learning, which is we're going to give you a goal, which is win, not learn Go, win Go, okay? We're going to give you some constraints, which is you can't do anything outside of the board, like kill somebody or something like that, as if this was possible. And then also, we're going to give you one more thing, which is an unending number of videos of grandmasters beating each other in the game of Go, and just figure out how to win. And so they just threw a bunch of compute power at this. This was actually one of the first times they started using GPUs for this kind of computing, back when Jensen was a no-name individual. And what happened? They ended up, watch the documentary. It got so crazy that the individual that they beat, his name is Lee Sedol, or Sedol Lee, it's a Korean name. And he, at one point in the game, he got so freaked out by a move, he left the room, went outside and had smoked a cigarette. In Korea, that's what you do when you're like really, really stressed. Okay, you go outside and you smoke a cigarette. I know, because I'm Korean. And when he came back in, he ended up losing. And then they asked him, like, what was going through your head? And he said, in all my years of playing this game, I've never seen a move like that. Like, no human has ever done that move. This computer created a different move, right? And when they asked the people at Google, they said, well, how did you program that move? And they said, we didn't program that move in. We don't even know how this thing works. There are no rules to this AI. Instead, what we did was we gave it a brain-like structure, artificial neural networks, and then we told it to learn. This is called connectionist AI in its technical term. I like to call it brain-inspired AI. Okay, so you have rules AI, and then you have brain-inspired AI. And these are two very different types of AI. Well, okay, this looks a bit confusing, but I'm going to give you another story. And I use this everywhere because I think at the very minimum, we need to understand what this graph means or what this vector space means. So when I was doing my studies, my graduate studies at the University of Illinois in the early 2010s, we were a bunch of nerds. We're at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. And one day I remember my buddy coming in. He actually, I think, works at IBM now, IBM Research. And he comes in the seminar room and he's like, guys, Google just dropped a new paper, okay? Now for us, that's like Taylor Swift dropping a new album. All right, we're like, oh shoot, right? New paper, and then like start reading the paper, right? And so as we're reading this paper, we're like, what in the world? And he said, dude, and he started drawing these things on the board. And I'm just being totally serious. I was the dumbest one in my cohort, right? And everybody else works for DeepMind and everything. And so I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. So like, explain it to me like a 4-year-old, right? And so he starts explaining, and he said, okay, what they did was they took this huge body of English words, which was Google News, right? And Google News for 10 years. They had this compilation of like how the English language is used without slang and without inappropriate language because it's news. And they dumped this thing into a very similar computer that was used to train AlphaGo. And they just said, learn. And what the computer did was, because it doesn't understand words, it had to convert the words into some kind of numerical representation that a computer could understand. So it made it into something like this. Now, this is two-dimensional graph because we as humans, we can only understand 2D or 3D, but the computer actually did this crazy judo move, which it created 1,000+ dimensions. What does that even mean? We still have no idea in the field what that means, but the computer did it. And instead of using words, it translated all those words to a vector representation. Now, growing up in grade school, I don't know about you, but I was taught that these are called graphs, and each point in the graph are called coordinates. Well, you get into like linear algebra, physics, these kind of things, and then you realize, oh, it's actually called vector space, and then each coordinate is actually a vector because there's directionality involved and whatnot. And so this is vector space with regards to words turned into vector representations. And I'm showing you 2D, but it's really like 1,000D. So it's not like x comma y. It's like x comma y comma thousands more, right? They started noticing crazy things about this thing. If you look at the word woman here, and let's say pretend, again, if this was 2D, that it has x coordinate 1.5, y coordinate 2.25, and then this word queen, x coordinate 2, y coordinate 2, they started realizing that, wait a second, the distance between these two words are very similar to the distance between the word man and the word king. Or the distance between the word Paris and France are very similar to the words distance between the words London and England. And then all of a sudden they realized, these intelligent Googlers realized, wait a second, once you convert things to vectors, there's a whole body of mathematics in which you can do interesting things with vectors called linear algebra. And that's when this happened, where they started to do wild things, where they're just like, okay, kind of like how a calculator would do this, but a calculator on words. What if I take the vector representation for the word king minus the vector representation for the word man, plus the vector representation for the word woman? What vector comes out of that arithmetic equation? And they found that the vector representation for queen came out, which is crazy because it kind of makes sense. King minus man plus woman equals what? Queen. How did we do that math in our head? We have no idea. It just came out, right? And they realized, wait a second, is this the underlying mathematical structure underneath the human language? There is mathematical structure beneath the language that we use. And do we fully understand it? There is no way we understand it, especially because it's represented in 1,000+ multidimensional space. But we do know is that all of a sudden we've got this technique that enables brain-inspired generative AI today. These are called word embeddings. If you want to geek out, go deep into this. This is the foundation for the technology called transformers that you may have heard of. And transformers are the foundation for the technology called generative AI, which you definitely have heard of. How does generative AI create all of these, looks like it has intelligence, but really what it's doing is extremely advanced autotype? How is it doing this extremely advanced autotype? How does the autotype on your iPhone work in your Messages app? It works through this. It starts with putting language into this format, and then it does mathematical calculations to autotype so well that we think it's human. Okay, so the history of why AI is so good at coding. Instead of Google News, what if you put things like Stack Overflow? Like all of Stack Overflow. Does anyone know Stack Overflow? Most of you know Stack Overflow. This is a tech conference, right? Okay, so if you don't know what Stack Overflow is, for the few of you here, Stack Overflow is like the nerds version of Quora, okay? And if you don't know what Quora is the space on the internet where you can ask any question, and you'll sometimes get reasonable answers, and most of the time you'll just get trolled, okay? All right, people will just destroy you. You ask a question, what's the meaning of life? Like, you are not the meaning of life, something like just so mean. Well, Stack Overflow is a much more, I think, nice place where you ask coding questions. You say, I've got this function, I don't understand why it's not working, blah, 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 and then so many people just jump in. I don't know who these superstars are. All day they're just answering Stack Overflow, and then people are upvoting and upvoting, and so you have this website that eventually became, I don't know if any of you are developers and have never used Stack Overflow, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life, right? It is so helpful. And what people at these companies, OpenAI, realized was, let's just dump Stack Overflow into vector space. And let's dump GitHub. I'm sure most of you, everybody knows what GitHub is. Let's dump GitHub into vector space. And what happens? Once you convert all of that into vector space, what can this generative AI trained on Stack Overflow, GitHub, in the way that I explained it with regards to brain-inspired AI, what can it do now? It can code. And it can code better than any human can code. It doesn't even know what coding is. just like AlphaGo doesn't even know what Go is. It's just awesome at it, right? That's what has been, that is the history of how generative AI has become so good at coding. Now, here's a picture of myself when I was young. Now, by the way, this is not a real photograph, although the head to body ratio is very similar. This is me when I was a young kid, growing up in inner city Chicago. I was an immigrant kid, Korean parents, moved here, same story, right? Like $300 in their pocket and nothing else. And so I remember growing up, we had nothing. And I remember thoughts of like, I just want one t-shirt that's new, that has some branding that's not a Korean brand, Nike, like I have a Nike t-shirt, right? But I was kind of a nerd, so I was like, I want a Nintendo, an NES, the original. All my friends had Nintendos, and I didn't have a Nintendo, so I was begging my dad in Korean, Appa, can you give me a Nintendo, please? And my dad is career military, like hardcore, through the Korean War kind of guy. So like he said nothing, right? He just stared at me like a military general. And so I just every day asking for a Nintendo. And then come Christmas, I see a box with wrapping under the tree, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got a Nintendo. I open up that box. The HVAC stopped for this moment. I open up that box. And what do I see? A Radio Shack TRS-80. And my dad said, this is called a computer. It's the future. Learn it. He drops his mic and he just walks away emotionless. And I start bawling. I'm like, what is this? I don't know what this is. And my heart was crushed. But of course, I tell this story now because I'm so indebted to my dad. He was absolutely correct. That's all the money that he had that he could spend on something, and he bought me something that was the future. And so that began my programming career, because eventually after I stopped crying, I was like, I gotta figure out what this thing does. I started figuring it out. I took it apart, put it back together, took it apart, put it back together. I got a Tandy 1000, and then it just on from there. And I learned how to code from a very, very early age. In fact, in Chicagoland area, in the suburbs, I was one of the first people that had one of the bulletin board service nodes for email in Chicago. And I was like a 14-year-old kid, and everybody was, when they found out I was 14, they're like, you should not be doing this. And I was like, I got to get off the phone because my parents need to use it. If you remember that, right? You remember that? Right? Well, that led to me, I never stopped being passionate about it. This is a digital computer laboratory at the University of Illinois. I did my undergrad there for CS. Now there's 2 new buildings because of Thomas Sievel's unlimited funds, but this is where we used to do CS, in the basement of this building, not even in the first floor, the basement. And I remember being in that basement, and we'd have these machine problems, which are homework assignments for these 300+ person lectures. Nobody helped you. Everybody flunked these classes. It was like 75% attrition rate. And I would spend a week to get something to compile on these Sun microsystems, because you had to do it in Unix. You couldn't do it on your personal computer. And one week, the assignment was create the beginning of the workings of chess. And they gave us 2 weeks to do this. And I still remember those 2 weeks. I mean, we were down there. We were not eating. We were not sleeping. Because again, back in the day, compilation, it's a zero-sum game. It's just either it works or it doesn't work, right? And so we're racing, and I still remember I just made it, and I graduated barely, but I just made it with that game chess. 2 weeks of just almost, it felt like 24 hours of programming each day. I'm sure, obviously it wasn't, but it felt like that. About a month ago, when ChatGPT released o1 preview, I asked it one prompt: create me the game Minesweeper that I can play on my Mac from my web browser and make sure it's only one file. 10 seconds. Boom. Fully working Minesweeper. Now, if any of you have ever, or if none of you have programmed games, games are one of the hardest things to program in computer science. There's so much complexity to games, okay? So this thing just like blew my mind. Then I said, okay, I don't know why. The next thing was, create me Flappy Bird. This just came to my head. And then it said, Flappy Bird is copyrighted. I cannot create Flappy Bird, but I can create Tappy Plane. I'm like, what the heck is Tappy Plane? It's this open source, non-copyrighted version of Flappy Bird with the plane and like mountains. And I said, all right, create me that. Boom. 20 seconds later, tap eat plain. And then I said, create me chess. That took about 2 minutes. Boom. These are actual screenshots, by the way. And that's when I realized, what is going on, right? This has to change things. Now, I'm not one of those that's like, okay, Terminator 2 is coming. But it's also, and I'm also not saying every developer is going to lose their jobs. But to think that this isn't going to change how we do development, that makes no sense to me. That's illogical to me. So, the changing landscape of software engineering. Current state of software engineering education, and I work with even K through 12 at this point in Pittsburgh to understand how coding is taught. But this is also true for coding, boot camps and at colleges. I work at the University of Pittsburgh and closely with Carnegie Mellon. So we teach specific languages like Java, Python, and development environments, IDEs, and then an emphasis on syntax and especially coding practices. Coding practices are very important to software development, right? If you don't understand coding practices, you're not really a enterprise developer because you can't do it without these things. That's how we teach it, right? And that's a great way to teach it. It's how we should teach it. But now we have this rise in AI and coding, this is from a McKinsey report from last year. I think these numbers are potentially low. Approximately 20% of software engineering tasks could be automated with current AI technologies. Developer productivity might increase by up to 30% due to AI assistance. And core engineering roles will evolve rather than be eliminated, focusing more on higher level design and decision making. One of the things that really bothers me, and I don't want to even go into the landscape of Silicon Valley and the politics of Silicon Valley because they're very real, and I have many friends there. But unfortunately, the AI discussion has gone into political reasons, extreme discussions. Either Terminator 2 is coming and we need to protect ourselves from the impending doom of the destruction of humanity, or AI is going to create this new utopia that's going to fix everything and we're all going to be so happy, right? There really are these two extremes. And it's kind of driving, accelerationism, if you know that, effective accelerationism, and then AI safety / it's kind of effective altruism has kind of co-opted that group. But what's really happening right now is, yes, the economists say that there's going to be new types of jobs and it's going to be, net positive potentially with this technology like the Industrial Revolution. But they also agree that just like the Industrial Revolution, that intermediary period is rough, right? What happened to the blacksmiths, right? And so we have to be thinking about that period because we literally do these jobs, right? I was so thankful that the Wall Street Journal finally reported on this because I've been hearing this from my buddies that work in Silicon Valley. Many of them work for the big tech companies. If you've ever heard of these layoffs that are happening, like these tens of thousands of people being laid off, these are some of my friends. And these are my friends that, they live in Mountain View, so these salaries sound crazy, but just FYI, Zillow just reported that if you want a lower middle class existence in Sunnyvale, you have to have a minimum salary of $450,000 a year, okay? So my buddies making $400,000 as full stack software engineers, they're getting laid off by Microsoft, by Amazon, by Google. Why? They're not going to say it, but the companies are not going to say it, and I'm not making villainizing the companies. I think you got to do what you have to do as a business in light of technologies. It's just a reality. So I'm nothing negative towards. Maybe a little bit, but but my buddies, they'll say directly, right? It's because of AI. We were told it's because of AI, right? And it's not because we know what AI is going to do. It's just we have to get lean and prepare for the potential that this technology is going to have on our companies. And a lot of people say if the Wall Street Journal is reporting about it, it's kind of, any major periodical, it's already happened, right? So it's just kind of post hoc reporting about this stuff. So implications for future software engineers, which some of us are in here. If we end up having the same amount or more in the future of engineers, okay, in the way that we have them now, we probably are going to need to be shifting from writing code to designing systems and solving complex problems, which could be nice for some, right? Instead of just spending all day in code, you're thinking about higher order architecture, right? And thinking about more intense problems that could be solved because you don't have to spend as much time with regards to the coding of it. Increased focus on AI collaboration and oversight. So not only overseeing AI technologies, but we definitely are going into a future where we will be collaborating with these technologies, okay? Like maybe it'll be kind of robotic form where you're literally collaborating with this robot. But I mean, before that, the way that I use AI now is it really has become my, there's one of my screens, like I'm sure all of us have multiple screens. One of my screens is my AI screen. And as I'm doing things, I'm shooting stuff to my AI screen. I have my microphone almost always on, and my microphone is going to my AI and I'm talking to it, and it's talking back to me. I know this sounds weird. I'm telling you right now, it's really helpful. It supercharges what I'm doing. I have, I actually am a professor full-time, apparently, and then I have 2 companies that I run. Apparently, right? How am I doing this? It's with AI, I'll tell you that right now. But here's the thing, will we have the same amount or more software engineers? I personally would not bet on it. Do we have more blacksmiths? This is no knock on blacksmiths. I think that trade is a beautiful trade, but I think people do it nowadays more as a hobby, not as their means of taking care of their families. So, Gen AI, I want to just throw this out there as to where it's going. Okay, if you guys have heard of an agentic AI or AI agents, and that is a whole nother talk, but Gen AI is going to get better and better at coding, okay, right? And coding is rules AI, just FYI. When you code, you're building rules AI, right? Because it's something that powers something to do something that is like helping humans or human-like, right? That's rules AI in my book. So Gen AI is going to get better and better at coding rules AI, right? Software code runs much of the world. We have an increasing number of data collecting sensors in our everyday lives. In this room, I mean, just our phones alone, just constant collection of data, right? Especially with advertising. You ever notice that? Like, you're like, does this thing have a microphone? Is it recording what I'm saying? And then you see that ad? All right, that's definitely happening. I believe that's happening. I don't know for sure, but it's happening. So we have an increasing number of data collecting sensors in our everyday lives. Those sensors can send back data to Gen AI, then can adopt its rules AI code. And then what do we have? This kind of feedback loop is what can be categorized as agentic AI or AI agents. This is the technology that Microsoft, Google, every major tech company are investing in this, right? The OpenAI, why does it constantly need this infusion of billions of dollars? Obviously to power the GPUs and the data centers, but what are they being used for? They're trying to get to this. O1 Preview was the first step. They said it's the first time that they created a reasoning engine, right? It's not actually good at reasoning, but they market well. But it's trying to get to this. Can we get to a future where the AI is kind of coding itself and it's kind of building its own self? This is what an AI agent is. Now, when you understand that concept, that should bring both intrigue and concern, right? But that's what's happening. So let's be sober and let's be real about it. Preparing for career fluidity, my last point. So the future of jobs. The World Economic Forum, this is from their report of 2023, estimates that by 2025, 85 million jobs will be displaced due to a shift in labor between humans and machines. Simultaneously, 97 million new roles may emerge that are more adapted, right, to this new future. We need to be taking this seriously. I'm a small business owner, but some of you are part of large businesses and are leaders of large businesses. We need to be taking this very, very seriously, right? What impact is this going to have on our businesses? What impact is this going to have on us trying to make, in my opinion, humane and right decisions, where we say, and we draw a line in the sand and say, we're pro-human, okay? Like, we are human, actually, right? We're pro-human, draw a line in the sand. We're going to figure out how to help our humans through this, because I'm also a human, right? But we can't ignore that this is happening. So what does that even look like? I work with K through 12 a lot in Pittsburgh, and my pro bono on the side, and I'm realizing, man, I wish I had all the time in the world to just focus on this, because what's going to happen with our children? Who's training them up, right? I have a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old, and I'm actively training them in AI. My 5-year-old knows more about AI than most adults. The same report highlights that 50% of all employees will need reskilling by 2025 as adoption of technology increases. Have you ever seen that meme and there's so many memes, but there's a meme of every president since Bill Clinton, and these aren't like deepfakes, these are real, where each president is saying, and now we know that we're going to need to upskill or reskill the workforce, right? Because technology has been changing things forever, But the meme was created because it was showing that it's bipartisan, every Democrat, Republican. But the point of the meme is it never works, right? Why? Because reskilling is hard, right? I'm 45 years old. It's hard for me to learn new things. You telling me that like a dock worker that's striking right now so that automation doesn't get put into their docks, that they're going to learn how to do Gen AI, right? It's difficult. So we got to be thinking about that. I'll throw this out there, and by the way, these slides will be on my website if you want a copy of these slides, and my website is at the end here. Any task that involves generating or reproducing variations of syntax-based language or concepts, I'm not going to read this, but basically, these kind of things are very vulnerable to disruption by generative AI. This is why coding was so vulnerable. It's about very specific syntax, and there's a large body of it on the internet that is examples of it. If there's anything like this, such as short form speed news reporting, right? The reason why so much news now is AI generated is because there is so much of this short form news kind of stuff on the internet that was scooped up and then now it's being reproduced. Legal contracts, at some point, right? This is going to be just Gen AI producing these things. Simple graphic design. It's basically in many ways replaced right now, which is really interesting because I talked to copyright lawyers, some of our nation's leading copyright lawyers. They said that the trademark office says any image that's generated by generative AI, you cannot copyright it. So then I thought, hey, there could be a whole cottage industry of after you create something with generative AI, you send that design to a real graphic designer, and then they actually just draw it, and then they copyright it for you as a service. That's cool. Think about that. Or non-unique idea filmmaking. Have you seen some of these AI-generated films? The ones that are most shocking are the ones coming out of China right now. Oh my gosh, like you thought that the OpenAI one was amazing. It's called Minimax. Search the internet for Minimax. It is insane what is coming out of the Chinese AI filmmaking sector, or I don't know, businesses. It's crazy. So start thinking about the tasks that you do in your jobs and take some time to consider what it may look like considering this statement. This probably feels negative and it sounds negative, but what I'm trying to suggest is, okay, it's just reality. And one thing that I love about Pittsburgh that I've learned is that people, they put their heads down and they work hard, right? That's what I've learned about Pittsburgh. And I think that's just the attitude that we all have to have, is that just deal with it. Let's put our heads down and let's work. And let's get this done rather than people ignoring this, which I see a lot of, which is really sad. Skills we need to be teaching ourselves and our children. And these are real things. I work on this with my children. Learning how to learn. We need to learn how to learn again, right? Because somehow we've gotten even the way that college is structured, and I am a professor, but I question sometimes universities in the sense that we make people so focused on one thing and very, very segmented. No, we have to learn how to learn broadly, right? Because this technology is going to take over a lot of the very, very niche things. Probably going to be better than us at. Think about Demis Hassabis winning the Nobel Prize for chemistry. That guy doesn't know chemistry. He's a really cool guy. So Demis does not know chemistry, but he solved with his team protein folding using AI. It is nuts. No knowledge of chemistry. And he just won a Nobel Prize for chemistry. Isn't that weird? Actually, Geoffrey Hinton is not a physicist, and he won the Nobel Prize for physics because there's no Nobel Prize for computer science. We need to learn critical thinking and analysis. I'm sure all of us can agree with this at the current state of just logic. Creativity and innovation, emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. One of the things I just drive with my kids, I'm like the first, sorry, this sounds offensive, but I'm like the first Asian to tell my kids, I don't care about your grades. I care about how you treat people. All right, no offense. My parents, A+ was given. It was like, that's like minimum. What's above A+? I don't know, but that's minimum. Emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. Technological fluency across disciplines. The days of, and I'm sorry, I'm picking on doctors here, but the first people I think about when, I've met so many doctors that are saying like, I don't want to touch a computer. I don't know, I don't know what that, I don't want to touch that thing, right? And okay, I guess that was cool for a period, right? But we got to go way beyond that. No matter what your career is, people need to get past thinking computers are a mobile phone or an iPad or a laptop, right? We have cloud infrastructure now. It is so complex how these architectures are now. And I think the general public needs to have a better understanding of, the fact that we're investing in GPU companies like NVIDIA, so many people, and they don't know what a GPU is. Isn't something wrong with that, right? Why don't I create a, I don't know, like lemonade company or whatever, something like widget company and just invest in it. If you have no idea what it is, that's not acceptable moving forward. We need to have more technological understanding and fluency across disciplines from a young age. We need to learn how to deeply leverage AI to empower ourselves. This is another thing that we can do right now, is that you can start learning these technologies, no matter how young or old you are. Use these technologies for your advantage. Things I'm able to leverage these technologies to do are just mind-blowing, and it's helped me to be so much more efficient in everything that I do. And then, of course, learning how to collaborate with AI. I'm really trying to push the envelope with this with myself. Again, I have my microphone on, my Shure mic in front of my computer, and I'm just talking to my computer all the time. But it's in a private and secure environment. My co-founder is a cybersecurity. He grew up as a hacker, so we're safe. But within that tenant, I'm going for it, right? I want to see if I can build up this AI that can really know me, right? And then this is just a random thing. Anything that involves complex physical trades. So I actually tell my kids that maybe instead of going to college, I might send you to trade school. Because if you know AI, you realize that things like plumbing, things like electrical work, these woodworking, it's almost impossible for AI to do right now. We don't actually, there has to be a major jump in AI for that to be replaced. But coding, which again is this huge irony because it's created by coders, that is actually much easier to replace than a plumber. So I want to finish, right on time. I want to finish with two stories. The first story is one of my buddies, I'll call him Mike, it's not his real name, but he's a semi-famous head of product design from the Silicon Valley. He's developed products that we all use, right? Tech products. I won't name them because then you probably could find them. The one thing that always held him back, because he was a history major, and he is a design guy. He didn't know how to code. So he'd be at these big tech companies, and he's creating these crazy product ideas and designs for these companies. But then he was always at the mercy of the developers. Right? He said he would be like fighting with the developers. They wouldn't want to do what he wanted to do, blah, blah, blah. And so he just always felt like second class, right, in these tech companies. Well, he did quite well, and he left these companies, and now he does his own thing because all of a sudden, he's immersing himself in generative AI. And what he found was, wait, I can do this by myself. And so he created his own company where he's creating unbelievable designs of products as a consultant using Gen AI to do the coding for him. Now it's lightweight. So if he needs back-end heavy coding, then he comes to me, and then we partner together. But lightweight stuff, he's producing this stuff weekly. These cycles that he said he used to take at like Amazon that would take 3 months, he's doing it in a week because he's doing it by himself, and he's got a design background. And when I think about him, I think, okay, there's like a real positive side to this, right? And the second story I'll tell you is last night, and I apologize, I didn't ask her for permission, but I don't think she's here. At the reception last night, I met these two young individuals, a man and a lady. I think they're dating each other, but I think it's public, so it's okay. And I was just kind of getting to know them, and then one of the ladies, I said, oh, so, what's your story, et cetera, et cetera. She says, this is my first tech conference. I said, your first tech conference? Wow, that's crazy. I feel like I've been to 1 billion in the last 20 years. And then she said, and then I recently became a software developer. I said, oh, you really? What were you doing before? She said, oh, I was doing customer service. And then I just decided that I want to make a pivot in my career as a young lady. And so I became a software developer, and now I do software development. And I was really moved when she said that, because I wanted to just start saying all this stuff to her, but I was like holding myself back because I don't want to be too much. But I told her, I said, you know what? You made a huge jump, a jump that most people are too afraid to make. When you went from being a customer service specialist, and then she trained up. She said she took a boot camp, she did the work, and now she's doing software development. And I said to her, I said, you know what, AI, it's coming fast, but someone like you already made the big jump, right? The AI stuff, you're gonna have a much easier time, because that's a lot easier to figure out than what you just went through. And I thought about her and last night, and then I thought about her, well, actually, I lost a lot of money at the craps table, I thought about that. And then this morning, I thought about her again, and I thought to myself, man, she is one of the people that I'm just gonna have in my head as this kind of, I hope I can stay in contact with her, but if I don't, just this idea that, you know what, we can do this, right? We can evolve in our skill sets. We can superpower and supercharge ourselves just like she did. And I told her, I said, man, I hope to see you in some other tech conference in the future. I really wish her luck. But I think that this is possible for all of us because the impacts that AI for software engineering is having right now should be telling us something about how we, whether we're software engineers or not, how we should be preparing for our future. And the last thing I will say is that this is my site. What we're trying to do through this site is, one of my companies, we do a lot of consulting for private equity companies, building up AI for them. It's a very interesting business, it's kind of cool. But through that journey, what I realized was business leaders need a different type of quick and accessible AI education just so that they can start using this technology. And then I realized, you know what, this site is just good for anybody. It doesn't have to be for private equity business leaders. This site can be just for anybody that's trying to learn AI and trying to use it for their careers. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build up a community on this site. It's only like 4 months old, so it's still very small. But my other co-founder is a social psych PhD. He's all about building frameworks for human behavior that are for healthy behavior rather than building social media to kind of bring us down. We're trying to build this community into something that will help people learn about AI and to be able to thrive into the AI-enabled future. So we would love if any of you or all of you could join us at this site. Thank you very much.
We do have some times for questions, Dr. Joe, so you don't get off that easy. Does anybody have a question? Yes, over here, Andy.
First off, thank you. It was a great presentation. There was a quote I read from Mark Zuckerberg the other day, which was that there's not enough technical literacy at the high end of a lot of corporations today, and let alone our government, right? What do you think is the best mechanism for improving that comprehensive technical literacy, right? You have resources like this, which you've just shown us, but how do we action that before it becomes too late and before there's wide sweeping ramifications across many job sectors?
Yeah, great question. I'm positive I don't have the real answer for this question, but I'll just mention a few thoughts that came right to my mind. First is you mentioned our site, but I will say that the reason why we created this thing, because again, I don't need another company, right? And this is actually a separate company now. The reason why we created it was because all we could find on the internet was either business school, like MIT, no offense, MIT is a great school, right? But business school courses for AI, for business leaders that are like super technical, like really long and intense and kind of expensive. It's like most business leaders are not looking for that. Or like how to be a prompt engineer on YouTube, and it was like, there's nothing in between. Like do what I just taught in the beginning with that vector space, I do that at private equity like leadership meetings, and everybody's like, oh, okay. And then in some senses, it's all they need to know to then be like, oh, then we shouldn't use this, we shouldn't use Gen AI for this thing. It's like, yeah, no, right? Hallucination, that's a real thing. Don't use it for that, right? And so that's when we started realizing, oh, like we don't need intense technical education for leaders that are making decisions, like government leaders. We need accessible education that just gets the core of the idea, the most important parts of the technical ideas, so that they can do what they do best, which is leading, which is governing, these kind of things. So that's why this site exists. The couple other things that I'm doing that relate to that is I do some work with state government in Pennsylvania, and then I do work with, interestingly, Canada. I don't know why. I'm not going to hate on. I love the U.S. I'm a U.S. Citizen born here, but for whatever reason, the Canadian government is very much more receptive to let's really discuss how to consider these technologies when it comes to the governing process. Now, Justin Trudeau, I think he may be ousted soon, so we'll see what happens. But I speak with members of his cabinet regarding these things, and I think that we need more of that from the governmental level. The third thing that it makes me think of is I do some work with one of the top 5 executive search firms. So, I'm sure many of you know there's executive search firms, right? And so I do work with one of the top 5. And one of the things that they've asked me is, what is this new type of leader that is going to help companies with AI, right? It's not really like a CIO. It's not even maybe really a CTO at this point. What is that job description, right? And so I've been working with them, and not that I know the answer, but they know positions and HR and search, and so I just said, okay, I'll do some work with you to try to figure out what does that look like, because I think businesses for sure are going to need help to figure that out. So,
Thank you.
yep.
I'll just snatch it right next to him. Related, but maybe the opposite end of the spectrum. You mentioned that you are training your kids on AI, and as a mother of 3 boys, we're both in tech clearly, and it's of interest to us. How do you help them learn more about AI while still staying safe? The internet is a scary place, especially for children. So reconciling those two ideas of learning more about tech, but still not, befalling the pitfalls of the internet.
Okay, thank you for that question. It is the most important thing for me, okay? And again, I promise, if I was some billionaire, this is what I would be working on, right? But I grew up as an immigrant kid. I am the retirement plan for both my sets of parents, so I'm working. With that said, okay, with my kids, what do I do? First of all, I'm not making this up. One of the things that my wife and I did was we started a rental property company in Pittsburgh that she runs. That's her job. Partially because it's a good investment, because Pittsburgh, its properties are amazing if you do pro formas. But I told her, we're not trying to create an enterprise here. Let's just buy properties that are older that we fix up together as a family so that my kids can learn how to do, most kids can't do these things. I can't even do these things. How do you fix the sink? Right? Well, let's fix it together, right? Because I do really believe that those things are going to be AI-proof for a while, and so that's one real thing I'm doing with them. Another thing that I'm doing with my kids is, if you ask my kids, even my 5-year-old, what's the real business of social media? Advertising. How does the internet work? It's an intention-based economy, right? My kids will yell that back at me, right? And my 5-year-old doesn't really know what he's saying. But my 10-year-old, she really gets it, right? And she doesn't have a phone yet, but she knows how social media, the business works, right? And I'm preparing her because she's going to get a phone soon. And once she gets a phone, she's going to use social media. But she's going to understand what it's really about prior to me activating that for her, right? The same with AI, is that I teach them, okay, how does generative AI work? It's a vector-based system, and then I actually have them use, it's not ChatGPT, because again, I created kind of a private GPT environment within our local, so we use llama models, so it's all contained, so it's not going out for reinforcement learning. Anyways, so, we have them use it, and then I talk through it with them. Okay, why did it say that? Is it actually intelligent? Is there a person behind this thing? These kind of things. Okay, that's what I do with my kids, but most people don't have access to that kind of thing. So the other thing that I have been doing in Pittsburgh, just because where I live, is that I meet with about 150 to 200 superintendents now, and I've been doing enough just kind of speaking for them, and they keep bringing me into these retreats, that I eventually said to them, okay, you all, I have this site, and you don't have to use it. I know it sounds like I'm promoting the site, but I tell you this site because it's where I am, right? I'm on this site, and I'm not on any other social media except LinkedIn. So if you want to use this site, because I know that the K through 12 stuff is going to be free, right? So it's not going to make me money, and that's great, and that's fine, but I can't do something separate for that because I've got too many things. So if you all want to build some kind of K through 12 educational, like networking community on Blue Fox Insights, you want me to weigh in with webinars on this site pro bono, like I'll do that, right? But that's my sphere. I think we need more of that, right? Whether it be these companies that are building AI, we need more free and accessible resources for not just parents, but K through 12 educators. And that is not something that we have right now in any framework within the United States. I also think that there's going to be things like mathnasiums and Kumons that are popped up that are for AI, right? And then everybody's going to send their kids there, but those are for people that have the finances to do that, right? And so, but that's probably coming. In fact, if any of you are thinking about opening a mathnasium or Kumon, I think that's another really good idea. So just throwing these little tidbits if you want to be an entrepreneur.
All right, we have time for about one more question. Dr. Flynn? Oh, he's stealing your question time.
Hi, my name's Michael Flynn. I'm with Frostburg State University. Great thoughts. I'm also part of the Maryland K-12 initiative to get computer science to roll out over 15 years into the K-12 space, computer science in the K-12 space. And the way that I always viewed that was, it's a freight train. You're not going to be able to stop it. We have to do this to prepare the students work side by side with computers and robots when they get out, whether they go into a trade, whether they go to college, wherever. And that's wonderful stuff. And then in 2002, generative AI kind of breaks onto the scene, and I'm out at SIGC and other conferences, and I'm saying, look, I'm seeing this as a freight train that's moving at supersonic speed now, right? And as predicted, we're seeing people get caught off guard by this. I see a lot of districts in Maryland saying, oh, no, we can't let them use generative AI. They're going to cheat. They're going to do this. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm in agreement with you. If we don't teach them how to use it responsibly, they're going to use it anyways, and they're going to be missing out, all right? So right now, at least in the local districts, and I say this because there's some leaders here that hopefully they can take it back, I'm fearful that the superintendents around here are fearful of generative AI getting into the schools, so we're just not going to touch it. It's also in that trough. Generative AI is in that trough right now. Quickest I've ever seen a technology go into the trough, climbing its way back out. So my question is this: how do we break the barriers down for our superintendents, for our districts in Maryland and Pennsylvania, to say, we got to get this in, and this is why? What are some thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I am not a K through 12 expert, but I will say that, again, in Pittsburgh, it started with just my local schools district. My superintendent found out that I did AI stuff, and then she wanted me to present, and then it just kind of exploded into this like 200 plus superintendents. And I'm very clear with them. I tell them very directly, you know, whether you believe me or not, I think you are hindering every student's growth if you are preventing them from using these technologies. Additionally, if you have the time, I can prove to you mathematically why these, Gen AI cheating, checking software things, they can never work, right? You're going to have more chance of accusing people that are not cheating of cheating than you are these software finding people that are using this stuff to quote unquote cheat. Right? So already, like, everything that you're thinking about doing, it's a pretty terrible plan, right? So instead, let's figure out ways forward. You have to embrace this technology, but responsibly. Teachers need to be trained up in this stuff. We should allow for teachers to have freedom and resources to be able to, first and foremost, just play around with this stuff. Because again, there is no exact manual for generative AI because of what I talked about. It's a statistical model. So it's like the game AlphaGo playing Go. It's like you have no idea what's going to come out of that thing, right? So you got to teach people about the framework of how it works, what is a hallucination. I think hallucination is a terrible term, and I say this all the time because it's a marketing term. It's a term used by companies to make it feel like, oh, the model is kind of like a human, and sometimes it gets tired, and then it hallucinates. It's like, it never hallucinates. It does the mathematically right thing every time, just sometimes we don't like what it says, right? And then we say, oh, that thing is a hallucination. No, that's just a mathematical answer that is correct, right? When you start realizing that, you realize, oh, it's always going to have weird answers, no matter how much we push this technology forward. That is true. If that's true, then you should change how you use this technology. The thing that I tell a lot of business professionals is, Gen AI, it can make you more efficient, but you have to check the work. So if there's ever a task in which it takes you longer to check the work than to just do it without Gen AI, don't use Gen AI, right? But if Gen AI allows you to do something where checking it is fast and the Gen AI speeds you up, use Gen AI. These are kind of frameworks that are not that technical to understand, but it absolutely will help somebody figure out how to use this technology better. Our students, maybe someday we say, okay, like if you're going to create an essay with Gen AI, here's the reality. That essay is going to be loaded with false things, right? Because it's not a truth engine. It's not a historical verification of citation engine. It's an auto-type mechanism. So I tell teachers, you want to really check if the essay was created by AI, read the essay. And if you read the essay and it says Abraham Lincoln was the 45th president of the United States, wait a second, right? This was generated by AI. Let's do some more work with regards to, yeah, you can use this technology, but you need to check the facts and do your research. These kind of things.